Well, folks, buckle up, because this week we're diving headfirst into a story so profoundly messed up, even I'm struggling to find the humour in it. It all centres around former President Joe Biden and a series of statements so shocking they could very well redefine his entire legacy. We're talking about potential war crimes, folks. And no, this isn't some hyperbolic exaggeration. These are accusations levelled against a nation that the United States considers its closest ally in the region. This isn't about partisan politics. This is about something far bigger, far more serious. This is about the fundamental principles of human decency, about the very soul of American foreign policy. We're talking about holding immense power to account, no matter how uncomfortable it gets. So where do we even begin? Let's rewind the clock to the waning days of the Biden presidency. The world watched in horror as the Israeli-Palestinian conflict erupted once again. It was during this powder keg of a moment that Biden made a series of startling admissions, confessions that would send shockwaves through the international community. These weren't just off-the-cuff remarks. They were carefully considered statements that revealed a deeper, more troubling reality. Newsrooms around the world scrambled to make sense of what they were hearing. Analysts debated the implications, questioning what this meant for global politics and alliances. Protests erupted, with people demanding accountability and transparency. Inside the White House, Biden's advisors were in crisis mode, trying to manage the fallout. International leaders called emergency meetings, trying to navigate the diplomatic storm. This was a moment of reckoning, not just for Biden, but for the entire international community. The stakes were incredibly high, with real human lives hanging in the balance. Biden addressed the nation, his tone somber, acknowledging the gravity of the situation. The public's reaction was mixed, with some praising his honesty and others condemning his actions. History will judge this moment, just as it has judged other pivotal moments in American leadership. As Biden walked away from the podium, the weight of his words hung heavy in the air. This is a story that will continue to unfold, shaping the future of American foreign policy and its role on the world stage. Conversations are happening everywhere, from the halls of power to everyday cafes, as people grapple with the implications. And as the sun sets over Washington, D.C., one thing is clear. The world is watching, and history is being written in real time. Picture this, the Oval Office late at night. The weight of the world is on Biden's shoulders. The phone rings. It's Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel. The conversation is tense, strained. Netanyahu, facing mounting international pressure, insists that Israel's actions are justified. He argues that they are necessary to combat Hamas, a designated terrorist organization. But Biden pushes back. He recounts a chilling warning he delivered to Netanyahu just days after the October 7th Hamas attacks. Don't go into those civilian areas. Don't do it, Biden recalls telling Netanyahu. But Netanyahu, according to Biden, seemed unfazed. He argued that Israel had no choice but to target those areas, citing the need to eliminate Hamas's military infrastructure. This is where things get really unsettling. The atmosphere in the room shifts palpably, as if everyone collectively holds their breath, waiting for what comes next. In an almost casual aside, Biden then drops a historical comparison so chilling, so unbelievably tone-deaf, that it's hard to believe it actually came out of a US president's mouth. The room falls silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air like a dense fog. He compares Netanyahu's justifications to those used by the United States in 1945 when it dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan, effectively ending World War II. The devastation was unimaginable, the loss of life staggering, and the moral implications still debated to this day. It reminds me of what we did for real in terms of the damage that was done, collateral damage, Biden muses. His tone is reflective, almost somber, as if he's grappling with the enormity of the comparison he's just made. Now let's be clear here, folks, this isn't just a simple historical reference. This is a deeply controversial and morally complex issue. Comparing anything to the horrors inflicted on Hiroshima and Nagasaki is already walking a moral tightrope. The sheer scale of destruction, the innocent lives lost, and the long-term effects on survivors make it a subject that demands the utmost sensitivity. But for the President of the United States to draw a parallel between those atrocities and the actions of a close ally, it raises questions about judgment, about the appropriateness of such a comparison, and about the message it sends to the world. Well, that's not just walking a tightrope, that's setting the damn thing on fire and doing a tap dance on the ashes. It's a move that risks alienating allies, inflaming tensions, and sparking a firestorm of controversy that could have far-reaching consequences. So, what are we to make of Biden's startling admissions? Were they the genuine reflections of a man grappling with the moral complexities of war and the U.S. role in it? Or were they a calculated attempt to distance himself from the unfolding carnage in Gaza, to shift the blame onto Netanyahu and Israel? Let's be honest, there's a long and sordid history of American presidents making lofty pronouncements about human rights and international law while simultaneously propping up regimes with questionable, shall we say, human rights records. And Biden, despite his attempts to style himself as a champion of human rights, is no innocent bystander in this whole mess. Section 5. America's arsenal. Let's not forget, folks, the United States is the largest supplier of military aid to Israel. Those bombs raining down on Gaza, those fighter jets soaring through the sky, yeah, those are often paid for with your tax dollars. In fact, since 2000, the United States has provided Israel with over $150 billion in military assistance. That's more than any other country in the world by a long shot. So, to suggest that the United States doesn't bear some responsibility for the civilian casualties in Gaza is, well, let's just say it's a bit rich. Section 6. A grim toll. And the civilian toll in Gaza is staggering. According to the United Nations, over 7,000 Palestinians were killed in the 2023 conflict, including thousands of civilians. Hospitals were bombed, schools were reduced to rubble, entire neighborhoods were flattened, and while Israel maintains that it took every precaution to avoid civilian casualties, the sheer scale of the destruction tells a different story. These weren't isolated incidents, folks. This was a systematic campaign that left an entire population living in fear. Section 7. A legacy tarnished. So where does this all leave Joe Biden? How will history remember the president who acknowledged the potential war crimes of a close ally, even as his own administration continued to supply the weapons used in those very crimes? Will he be remembered as a peacemaker, a man who dared to speak truth to power, even at the risk of jeopardizing a critical alliance? Or will he be seen as a complicit enabler of violence, a man who talked tough but ultimately failed to prevent a humanitarian catastrophe? Section 8. The fog of war. It's a complicated legacy, to be sure. And in the fog of war, it's often difficult to separate fact from fiction, to untangle the webs of responsibility. But one thing is clear. Biden's shocking admissions have ripped open a Pandora's box of uncomfortable truths about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the U.S. role in it. These are truths that we as a nation can no longer afford to ignore. Section 9. A call to action. So what can we do? How can we, as individuals and as a collective, make a difference in this complex and often overwhelming situation? Well, for starters, we can demand better from our elected officials. We can insist that they listen to our voices and act in our best interests. We can demand that they prioritize diplomacy over military intervention, seeking peaceful solutions rather than resorting to violence. We can insist that they hold all parties accountable for their actions, ensuring that justice is served and that no one is above the law, regardless of their political allegiances. It's crucial that we push for transparency and integrity in all political dealings. We can educate ourselves about the complexities of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, delving into its history, understanding its nuances, and recognizing the humanity on both sides. Moving beyond the simplistic narratives often peddled by both sides, we can seek out balanced and accurate information, becoming informed and critical consumers of news. And we can support organizations working on the ground to provide humanitarian aid and promote peace. These groups are often the lifeline for those caught in the crossfire, offering hope and assistance where it's needed most. This isn't about choosing sides, folks. It's about recognizing our shared humanity and working together for a common good. This is about choosing humanity. It's about standing up for what is right and just, regardless of the complexities and challenges we face. This is about demanding a more just and peaceful world for all. A world where everyone can live in dignity and security, free from fear and oppression. Because in the end, silence is not an option. We must speak up, take action, and work tirelessly for a better future. That's our show, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and remember, your voice matters.